Ain't no life. Who know the lyrics? Scared to go home. I was that. Sing along. Oh, stay drum when things went wrong. We blame mama. Oh, I don't know that part. Alexa, pause. I'm sure some of you guys know the lyrics, but I was one of those. I could have played another mama song. I could have played another mom song. I'm thinking I could have. You guys, that's in there. Drop in the comment section another mom song that I could have, because we're talking about 10 things that I learned from my mom about money. So I was thinking about mother songs. So you guys drop up. There's one coming in my mind right now. It's by Boys to Men. It's by Boys to Men. I can't think of it. So if you guys think of it, drop it in the comment section, okay? So obviously it's Money Monday and it's Shawnee, and I'm super excited because today we're going to be talking about some of the cash concepts that I gathered from my mother. Really good things. And earlier today, I was tinkering around and letting people share some of the things that they learned from their mother. And oftentimes when I'm working with my clients, oftentimes they go, I didn't learn anything from my mother when it comes I didn't learn anything from my mother when it comes to money. And I always find that very, very odd, especially if their mother is still alive, or, you know, that they grew up with their mother. So when they say that to me, I always share a few other things with them that I'm going to share with you guys today to kind of, you know, switch that lens. So I'm going to share that. Also, I want you to open up your spiritual purse, open up your actual purse, open up your bank account, open up your spiritual bank account, whatever it is that connects you to your money, honey, because guess who got a new money? All right, so open up. It ain't gonna be all of that today. All right, you ready? Don't be acting stank. We just got you, okay? We can send you back. All right, so open up. You ready, sis? Whoa! I hope that you receive that, especially if you are a mother in any form. If you are nurturing someone, if you're nurturing your dreams, if you're nurturing children, if you're nurturing a child, if you're nurturing a business, celebrate that part of yourself that is a nurturer. If you are receiving nurturing from anywhere, in any form, in any way, celebrate that, right? Celebrate that. All right. Also, I have some giveaways. Okay, let me tell you. Yeah, all month long. So every Monday, you guys want to tune in because I am going to be giving away some gifts. Let me show you what's inside of this box. All right, so we have my book, 10 Things Every Woman Should Keep in Her Purse. It's a signed copy. It's Shawnee with the short hair. You know, quarantine, I ain't update the back yet, but, you know, information hasn't changed. Same crown, different queen, same queen, different crown. My signature T-shirt. I get money, I get money. You get likes. Okay, that's in there. And then, of course, my signature pin, my signature diamond pin. This one says money making pen. I Sprite. Okay, so that's the gift that I'm giving away all month long. So every Monday, you'll have the opportunity to win. What do you need to do to win? Number one, you need to share the show. You need to tag, you need to share the show. You need to tag a friend in the show. And you also need to send me your notes. Send me your notes because I don't just want you to just hear the information. I want you to move into implementation. So if you're taking good notes, that's going to increase the probability of you actually using some of the things that I'm sharing. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's talk about some of the things that I learned from my mother when it came to money. Okay, I'm going to pull those up. I shared a little of them earlier today, but let me just pull those up really quickly because I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so one of the things that I definitely learned from my mother was about life insurance. My mother was really adamant about that. It's actually a conversation that my mother had with me when I was maybe I want to say maybe 8 or 10. I was very, very young when my mother had a life insurance conversation with me. It was kind of like, this is the policy. This is where I keep it. And if anything happens to me, this is the money that I'm reserving for you so that you can be taken care of. That was a conversation that my mother had with me at a very, very young age. So I've always understood the value of life insurance, the value of income replacement. And that was something that my mom impressed on me very early. So I guess my first empowerment was kind of like from day one, where that you protect those that you love. And also I knew where the documents was. Thankfully that's not something that I had to tap into, when I was, very young, but I knew where the documents were. I knew the value of the policy. I didn't know a whole lot about policy language, but definitely my mother was, very strategic, in that entire conversation, trusting me with the information, telling me where it is. So in the event, if I needed to hold someone accountable, that I could. So that was the first thing. Create multiple streams of income. And often, and I'm going to tap into something that typically happens with my clients. Not only does it happen with my clients, but it happens a little bit online. It happened a little bit today. And whenever I ask, hey, what kind of things have you learned from your mother? Or maybe if it's like on a client side and I'm working with them, and oftentimes they'll say, Shawnee, I didn't learn anything from my mother. So interesting enough, I mean, some of these things that I'm sharing with you, my mother never really like sat down and said, this is about your financial health. This is how you take care of your family. This is how you take care of yourself. It was just implied by the action. So my mother did lecture me, but not specifically about money. I learned the things that I learned from my mother about money through my eyes, right? Which is now when I'm teaching my children, I do the best that I can not to lecture them, because as much as I would like to think they're listening, more than they're listening, they're actually watching, right? So, so for those of you who feel that you didn't learn anything specific, like your mother didn't sit you down and, say, do this and do that, and this is how you build your credit score, this is how you do that. Many of the things that I'm going to share with you today, I don't really recall my mother saying, make sure that you have life insurance. It was just impressed upon me when I was a child that, hey, my mother wanted to take care of me. And if I have children or I have a spouse, and in the event that my income is going to create a deficit for them, then I needed to put something in place to make sure that that didn't happen. So it didn't come from a conversation space. So for those of you who may be thinking in that way, like, gosh, I can't remember my mother teaching me anything in terms of lecture, start thinking about some of the things that you learned from your mother just in terms of observation. Sometimes people don't like the fact that not only do you learn from the good things that people do well, you also learn from the things that they don't do well, right? So you think to yourself, okay, my mother taught me the adverse of this by doing what she actually did, So if your mother wasn't a saver, then you learn to become a saver because maybe you watch some of the mishaps that your mother had to undergo in not being a saver. Maybe your mother, heaped up tons of credit card debt. And so the adverse to that lesson is, gosh, I saw some of the challenges that my mother had. I saw, sometimes when we had to go and look for a place, how many times it took for us to actually get accepted, all of those different things. So if you feel in your mind that, hey, listen, my mom didn't do X, Y, and Z, start thinking about what you saw your mother do. And I'm sure there's some lessons there for you. Okay. All right. So I'm going to get back to my list. The second thing that my mother taught me was to create multiple streams of income. Again, this is not something that she verbalized to me. I grew up in a hair salon. I grew up in a cosmetologist household. My grandmother was a cosmetologist. My mother is also a cosmetologist, but my mom had two jobs. Yeah, my mother always worked two jobs. I always saw my mother have two jobs. And not only did I see my mother have two forms of jobs, that my mother was always like into other ideas, other than just like she would entertain other people in terms of what they were doing in their businesses, in terms of their concepts. So I always saw my mother not just have one stream of income. So that's not something that my mother says to me that, hey, you need to make sure that you have, you need to maybe have two jobs. You need to have, this is something that I watched with my eyes. This is something that I watched with my eyes. This is something that I benefited from in terms of how my mom managed her schedule, in terms of being able to work, a full-time job in the day and then come home and work in the hair salon at night and then also on the weekends. That's why we were able to vacation. That's why I was able to go to college. That's why I had a lot of, access to things, because my mother just didn't use her single income as a way to provide for her family. So that was huge. Yes, you can relate to that. So multiple streams of income. And then maybe when you're thinking in your mind, like now, I can't remember ever in my professional world that I've worked more than one job, but I've definitely always kept my options open in terms of streams of income. So maybe, my mother didn't say you need to have multiple streams of income, but because actually at some point, longer on in my mother's career, I remember her no longer working in human resources. That's where my mother worked in the day. And she never really, if there was loss, then she already had another form of income in order to kind of get her to maneuver through that space. So no, in my professional world, I've never worked more than one job, but I've always had multiple streams of not just one thing bringing in my income, not just for income protection, but mostly for income protection, and then for diversification, just having the opportunity to leverage. So that's something that I learned from my mother. Class will open doors that your assets cannot. That's something that my mother was really good at impressing that upon me. Again, not that particular perspective, not from the space of like telling me, be very conscious of how you present yourself to the world. Be very conscious how you take up space in a room. Be very conscious about that. That is something that I learned through my eyes by watching my mother, by the way she conducted herself, the way she conducted herself with other women in the hair salon, the way that she conducted herself with other people. And I always felt like it opened doors. My mother has a lot of versatility. We're from Miami, so very well, we're hometown girls, but it was always very important that you had versatility, that, wherever you are, you need to be able to be yourself, but be able to absorb that space, if it's hood, then it's good. If it's class, then you got it, whichever way it was. And that versatility, I've seen her be able to capitalize from that level of versatility, socially. I've seen her capitalize on that economically. I've seen her capitalize on that in almost every way, just being able to present herself in a way that was very versatile. I think that's very important to, have, to be your full selves. Here's a comment. I'm grateful because they did what they needed to do and I had what I needed, but I've learned a lot and try to take care of her now. My dad passed away in 2019. Got it, right? That's good teaching. Yes, I agree. All right, so we're going to move on to the next one. Hold on. All right, so the next one is, so that point right there, for those of you that are taking notes, class will open doors that assets cannot. And sometimes some of the doors that I saw my mother make it into, some of the doors that I made it into, oftentimes, sometimes the people would have more education than me. They would have more financial resources than me. But there would just be a level of presence that would push me forward. And, very early on, my mother had me in charm school. My mother had me in etiquette classes. So I was never intimidated in any environment that I was in. I was never really intimidated, intellectually, economically, just because of the positioning that my mother gave to me. So thank you. All right. So for those of you that's taking notes, class will open doors that your assets cannot. Chew the meat. This is the next one. Chew the meat and spit out the bones. Yeah. So what does chew the meat and spit out the bones? I've seen my mother have a few different experiences in her life, economically, professionally. And as I think about my mother as a total person, I've seen her handle change very well. And I've seen my mother handle change very well. I can say that. And oftentimes when I work with my clients or when I work with some of my friends, and sometimes that is a prayer that I extend to them, that you can handle change, because that is in fact one of the only constants that we can pretty much, count on, that there is going to be some level of change that we're going to have to maneuver through. And being able to have grit, being able to have foresight, being able to have fortitude, is what gives you the capacity to kind of move through that. So that's definitely something that my mom, so it wasn't all, it wasn't always good, no, it wasn't. It wasn't always good, in terms of just some of the changes that I've seen my mother go through as a human being occupying the planet, right? But what I can say is that she handled change very, very well. So she chewed that meat, spit out the bones, sis. I know that's right. What's the next one? Make sure, this is probably one that all of you guys can really relate to with really ease. Make sure your eyes are not bigger than your stomach. That is not only my mother's wisdom, but that is also my grandmother's wisdom combined together. Make sure your eyes are not bigger than your stomach, right? And that ended up being like, how that concept stayed in the back of my mind in terms of like getting in debt. I always talk about how I only had $14,000 in student loans when I got out of school, just because even me, when I graduated from college, like I didn't run off and say, oh, let me get the nicest, car, even though some of my friends, when we graduated, that was the first thing they did. They bought a BMW, they bought a Jaguar, because they needed to solidify and speak to the world that I have arrived, this is the beginning point. I kind of kept my car until I bought my first house. I kept the same car. I drove that Dodge. They used to laugh at my Dodge all the time. I used to think it was so funny. But yeah, just having that foresight and not letting your eyes get bigger than your stomach, right? Where you're just over consuming, getting yourself into so much debt that, the amount of money that you're bringing in, it doesn't really make any sense. So I believe that, I had a good childhood. I feel like I really had a really good childhood. Some of it was a little skewed. Sometimes I can say that because I was the only child for a very long time. For those of you who don't know, I have a sister and a brother. I'm 10 years older than my sister, 14 years older than my brother. So for a very long time, I did live on the planet as the only child. And my childhood was it was pretty lavish. I have to say that. I have to say that. Yeah. So my modesty didn't come like when I was younger. I think those lessons came about as I got older. In terms of modesty, that's when the modesty started to come in. And make more sense. And I do remember one of the big things in terms of like credit card debt. I remember like when my mother, I can't remember how old I was, but I might have been maybe about 13 or 14 years old. And somehow she had gotten herself in some credit card debt. I don't know how much debt at the time, but I remember how important it was for her to pay that debt off. She talked about Discover so bad. I remember being in the back seat, I would hear her, negotiating with them. I remember her being agitated by them. Like, I just remember all of it. And she would complain, and when I get rid of Discover, I'm never going to get it again once I get out of Discover. And after that, she didn't have any more credit cards. She didn't. After that, she lived a very, a cash life. So when I got to college, because I can remember that. So for those of you who are always kind of looking for your lessons to come in the form of lectures, some of those things, I was just kind of listening into my mother. I was just kind of keeping my ear to the street. By growing up in the hair salon, I was always around women and resources. My mother's clientele were professors, teachers, nurses, all kind of educators. Just so these were professional women. So I would just sit, and get an earful. And not that they were lecturing me, it's just by keeping there. And the reason why I want to continue to impress that for those of you who feel like you didn't learn anything from your mother, I want you to give yourself an assignment when you get off this live and start thinking, okay, what did I learn from my mother vicariously? What did I learn from her? Sure, I can nick and knack about the things that I wish that she could do better. Of course, my children are going to grow up and they're going to have some thoughts and ideas that mommy could have done this better. And they're likely going to be right, right? That's what's supposed to happen. They're the next version. They're the evolution. They should be better than me. They should not be performing at the same level as me, because then at that point, then what have I really done? You know, that's what legacy is. So, so of course, there's always going to be a critique that you're going to give to your mother, to your father, but also be mindful of what did you learn, even if they never sat down and lectured you. All right. And these are things that I just got from looking and listening. That one goes over to wisdom must be transferred with wealth. Wisdom must be transferred with wealth. So I talk about that a lot because the baby boomers are the largest group of people benefiting from life insurance policies. They are the largest benefactors of money coming into them, and transfer that money over to their children. And oftentimes I always hear people saying, I want to give my children a life that they never had. I want to give my children a life that they never had, a life that I never had. That's what they're hoping to do. They're hoping to give their children a life that they never had. And I'm hoping that I can give my children more tools. Not that I am critiquing what it is that I felt that I received as a child. It's just to my last point that, you know, as a person, you just evolve. You know, my children should not do the same thing that I did. They shouldn't, you know, they shouldn't. Just doesn't make any sense. But as that money come into, come into, and I'm talking about Black wealth, for life insurance policies, 401k turnovers, and they are giving that money and leaving that money over to their children. My hope is that wisdom is also transferred over both in lessons as well as in lecture. Because sometimes when you're the first, and I do look at that a lot of the times with my clients, when they're the first millionaire or they're the first person to own a business and do very well, oftentimes their children, because they didn't have any of that sweat equity, sometimes they don't value it as much because they're kind of entitled. You know, they've always lived in a nicer neighborhood. They've always driven in a very nice car. They've always had, access to resources, versus when there's a little bit of sweat equity, connected to the consumption of money, the consumption of wealth. Sometimes they see it and they feel it a little bit differently. So when wealth is being transferred, also do a little bit of what my mother did in terms of this is what the life insurance policy entails, and then maybe what the addition, because here's something that I say to my children now, something that I communicate with my children now is if I hear them having a dispute or I have them having an argument, and I say, listen, this is something that I'm paying very close attention to because I'm going to leave you guys a lot of money. And here is more important to me is that you guys don't swindle all of this money in court because you guys don't have any conflict resolution skills, because you don't know how to have a disagreement, and you're going to waste all of my time, effort, and energy in court because you don't know how to resolve conflict, right? So sometimes I sit with my children and I allow them to have a disagreement, and I allow them to hear both sides and both perspectives, because I am already having the foresight, because in a couple of years, they're going to be managing this money. They may be managing me. I may leave here the resources that I've accumulated. I'm going to leave it to them. Here is some thoughts and ideas that I want you to have about how to share this money, how to transfer this wealth over to your children. This is how you preserve wealth, right? Yes, you do get to get some of the things that you want, but you can't have everything that you want and neglect your necessities, right? Make sure that some of your money is not only going out into the world, right, to create money, but you're also holding on to some of the money so that your portfolio has balance, right? So those are some of the conversations that I'm having with my children now as you create this wealth, right? Also, now my children are starting to manage, some of my messages and reply to some of my emails, right? Because I want them to have that skill set, in terms of, value, work, being a part of something, being compensated for what it is that you do, right? again, I grew up in a hair salon, so entrepreneurship was always in my eyes and in my blood. You know, I'm a natural entrepreneur just because that's what I saw. I saw my mother do it. I saw my grandmother do it. And I knew that my grandmother herself did not go to college, but all of her children did, right? Just because of the foresight that she had as an entrepreneur, So always just don't only look at what you learn through lecture, look at also what you learn through your lens. Those are very effective lessons. Build a business that transfers wealth. Okay, so my grandmother, everybody that kind of, if you're my Facebook friend, you hear me talk about my grandmother in terms of just the amount of admiration and respect that I have for her as a person, as a woman, and one of the biggest things that my grandmother, and this kind of merges together, is that my grandmother loved me, like she loved me incredibly, like it was just an insurmountable amount of love that she gave to me as a person. And sometimes people are like, Sean, you're so nice. It's like, thank my grandmother because she loved me. So once you have the opportunity to be loved so deeply, it just makes it very easy to transfer that love out to other people. It makes it very, very easy to do that. And so my grandmother's business, the cosmetology business, it actually survived her death. It's something that my mother still earns money from today because of the sustainability of the business, because my grandmother had customer service, because my grandmother had customer retention, right? And at that time, that's not something that was being taught to her, right? This is not, where you go and sit in the class where you learn that. It was just coming from, who she was, as a person. So her ability to take that business and transfer it over to my mother was extremely, resourceful. It exceeded her lifetime. So are there tweaks and things? Yes. Should there be tweaks and changes? Yes, in terms of that. But in terms of being able to create something and then transfer it over to your children, so that they can continue to maintain their well-being, is huge. It's huge. I still need to replicate that. Some of us listening on this live is something that actually needs to be replicated in our children. Make sure that your children are working inside of your businesses. My children are always talking about credit scores. They're always talking about beacons. They're always talking about FICOs. Sometimes I'll hear them mimicking some of the language that they hear me live. They also mimic their father. They mimic their father. Like they tear down their room because their father is into construction. So they'll rebuild their room. So I just want to keep saying that, especially for those of you that have like mother wounds where you feel like, my mom ain't teach me nothing. She taught you something. Whether she taught you through the opposite of the thing that you desire, or she actually taught you, right? Yeah. So that transferable wealth, that was thing number 7. Everything that you own cannot be on your wrist, in your driveway, or on your shoulder. I'll say it again. Everything that you own cannot be on your wrist, in your driveway, and on your shoulder. So I've always, my mother owned her house. My grandmother owned her house. All the women that came to the hair salon were homeowners. So it wasn't even, and I bought my first property when I was 21 or 22, somewhere in that number, where I was like having a birthday or whatever. And it was just like the norm. It was just kind of like standard that, like, you had to own something. So that is a lesson that just came to me, it's not something that my grandmother said, when you graduate, you need to buy a house. It's not, it's just what you see. More than what people say, it's what you see that you begin to implement. It was just a priority. It was just a priority that you owned. And mostly, I was not even present for the acquisition of property. I wasn't present when I was born. That was it. My grandparents owned their house. My mother owned her house. The women that came to the salon, they owned their homes. They talked about home ownership. So it was just like a start of it, right? So in my mind, when I began to create my foundation in terms of my finances, ownership was always right at the top of the list. So I share this with you, that your children are watching you, as your mother. They're watching what you prioritize. They're watching what you think is important. Even if you're verbalizing, constant things, you're giving them all this advice and information, I mean, they hear what you say, but they're mostly looking at what you do. And even if they're not watching what you do, you implement what it is that you see. That's what it is. So just naturally, no one ever said when you graduate you need to buy a house. That's not what happened. It's just that it was just natural. Everybody within that I saw, they owned a house. So it's like, it's like brushing your teeth. Everybody brushing their teeth. I need to buy me a house. They got a house. I got a house, right? So that principle was that everything that you own is not on your wrist, it's not in your driveway, and it's not on your shoulder. That was not your only ownership. So I definitely learned that from both my grandmother and my mother. Confidence can indeed build cash. Yes. Growing up in the beauty industry, how you look just played a large role. Some people might say it's vain or whatever. I'm not really sure. I don't know. I don't delve into that particular language. But my grandmother would say, if you look good, you're gonna do good. And that was like that. I mean, she would say that, like, if I came around her like looking a mess, because I would have my time. And she said, if you look good, you'll do good, right? So and to apply those lessons, yeah, some people are agreeing, right? Just giving yourself that attention, right? Not that there is a particular way that you should look, but I think that anything taken care of can be beautiful. Anything given attention to your hair, attention to the way that you treat your face, the way that you treat your body, the way that you position your clothes on your body. And then when you show up inside of the world, and this is just my own personal thing, is that I've always dressed for the jobs that I wanted. I've always dressed for the jobs that I wanted. And that is something that came from my grandmother, when my grandmother would take me shopping, like after we bought my dresses, she would take them and they would be tailored to my body. So even now, I have a seamstress, right? If I buy something, I don't care how much it costs, $50. I don't buy no $500 stuff. That just ain't me. I ain't criticizing it. Just I don't do it. Like, I just don't do it. Not that I can't. I just don't. I just haven't seen anything. Yes, and if you look good, you feel good. That's what my grandmother used to say, right? And it does. So cash for me does play a role in your confidence. It definitely did. Yeah, showing up fully the best that you could with what you had. So my grandmother would, like I said, she would take me to a seamstress if I bought a dress. When my shoes would be fitted to my feet. She would take me, have them sized to my, like, I remember, you guys remember going to Stride Right, putting your feet on that little metal thing and making sure that it was exact. So that type of attention, just given to children at a young age, just for me and my experience, it meant like, you're important, you're valued. Yeah, so it played a role. It played a role. Yeah. And oftentimes, sometimes when I see that, if you didn't receive that type of like care, not that you needed to have it in the same form that I did, but whatever your culture was, whatever your experience was with how you were pampered and treated, is oftentimes like when you're taking up space with other people, they may feel away, you know what I'm saying? Like they may feel away, but I was loved, and that was a currency. My grandmother's currency more than money was loved. And when you feel loved, for me, it just made it easier for me to set boundaries. I always knew when I wasn't being loved, because my grandmother was the measure. So love your children, as a mother, love your children, take that extra time, invest in them, because when they get out in the world, they need to have a clear picture of what love is and what love is not. So love was my grandmother's currency. It was her currency. And I got it. All right. Forgive. This is the last one. This is the last one. This is the last one. The last one is forgiveness is a wealth building tool. Forgiveness is a wealth building tool. This is last tip. This is tip number 10. Forgiveness is a wealth building tool. I would say that why would I say that forgiveness is a wealth building tool, and how does that come from something that I gathered from my mother and my grandmother? I think I've largely said that the entire show, where I'm not just looking at like, looking like, say, for instance, I'll hear sometimes my clients will say, well, my parents never taught me anything about investing, right? So, the most my mother probably knew about investing was her 401k, right? But that's language that my mother was using, around me. So that was language. So maybe my mother didn't fully understand, like, investing, in terms of stocks, bonds, mutual funds. She didn't understand that language, right? So I wouldn't position it and say, okay, my mother didn't teach me about it. Like, she used the language around me, right? The language was used. I would hear say, I ain't gonna pull out that money on my 401k. I ain't gonna touch my 401k. So I knew that it was a tool that existed. I knew that it was something, I knew it was a financial instrument. I knew that it was something that she was putting money into. So I consider it me to be the secondary lesson into terms, okay, so if my mother didn't understand it, then definitely I should. So if she started it, then I need to complete it. Okay, if my mother knows something, then that means that I need to know more, right? Not in a competitive way, just in an evolution. Start thinking of yourself as the evolution of your mother. That way you don't see her for what she's not, right? You see yourself, I'm the evolution. My mother should not have had what I had. She didn't even come onto the planet, at the same time that I did. She may not have the same education that you had. She might not, she might have the same education. She may not have the same experiences that you had. There's no telling what it is that made you, think a little bit differently. But if you're more aggressive than your mother, if you're more informed than your mother, then your mother served that, initial positioning so that you can, have something to admire, have something to look up to, have something to just go a little bit further. And then when you think about your daughter, right, or your son, right, you should say to yourself, okay, then if I'm already into stocks and bonds, what is this kid gonna do? Because I'm already breaking down this language to them right now where it's like baby food. So I look at my children and I wonder, like, wow, like, what are you gonna do? What are you going to do? Because I think of myself and think of what I have achieved, and now I'm sharing something with you. Yeah, maybe in some ways, right? In some ways we may, in some ways, I think to your point that your comment saying maybe a better version sometimes, right? Sometimes, and better is a very interesting word to use, right? It's very interesting because what we might consider better, our mothers might not consider it better. It just may be, in some ways it's a better version, sometimes it's a higher version, sometimes it's just a different version, right? Different might sometimes be really good, unless, some people came from some very interesting mother relationships, where maybe the mother, name called them, maybe their mother way of reprimanding them was high levels of criticism and you don't communicate that way, whatever the case may be, so better is an operative word. I'm very careful not to use that without knowing the specificities of the scenario. But I would say that that's interesting. I don't want to use that word, but I know what you're talking about. I don't want to use that word. So for those of you who've stuck with me, those are just some things that I've learned from both my mother and my grandmother about money. Growing up in a hair salon has always given me a high level of respect for women and their journey on the planet. Many of the women that came to my parents' hair salon, they would come for, years at a time. So I would see a woman begin here at this phase of her life, and then I would see her, at another phase of her life. I would see a woman, coming into a space as just maybe she's just starting out her job, and then I would see her eventually rise to the principal. So what that would give me the opportunity was patience, right? Vision, right? That where you are is not where you're always going to be, because I got to see a lot of women in their trajectory. I'm so thankful for my mothers. For those of you who want to, maybe the relationship that you have with your mother, there's a really good book. If you guys think of the name, if the name of the book, I can't think of it, but it was definitely written by Jennifer. Someone help me. Jennifer, drop me in the comments. She wrote a really good book, and she was talking about her relationship with her mother. If you guys can think of it, after the show, I'll come back in and I'll drop it in the comments because I can't think of it. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but it's a really good a really good book. And she shares a lot about her relationship with her mother and how once she got to, a different level within her life, she was able to connect with different mothers in different ways. And that's also, my grandmother is no longer, on the planet with me. And it's a relationship that I deeply, deeply miss. But I'm still being nurtured, I'm still being nurtured by other women. And also, your mother is not your only mother. I've always, because I grew up in a hair salon, I've always felt like I've had many mothers, right? I've always felt like I had many nurturers. I always had a lot of women given to me intellectually, a lot of women given to me emotionally, a lot of women just being visible so that I can have many forms of women. So if you are challenged, whether maybe your mother is not here, or maybe you don't have the best relationship with your mother, or maybe you're expecting for your mother to represent the total whole of a woman, right? There may be one only aspect of your mother that you can really really connect with. Maybe that's the part of her that can cook very well, right? Maybe your mother is very good at organizing. Maybe your mother is really good at child rearing, and then you wish that you knew more about stocks and bonds. So you need to connect with the mother in that way, a different woman in that way, where you can receive the type of nurturing that you need. You can receive nurturing through books. You can receive nurturing through workshops. You can receive nurturing in so many different places. So when I hear the word mother, I hear nurturer, I hear caregiver, I hear someone that cares for me and investing in me and caring about me. So that is not just available to you in just singularity, just the mother that you see, right? The mother that you were born with. Maybe that's just her space. That's it. But if you feel that there are some deficits, there's other ways to go about feeling that, right? And mostly looking at our mother in different spaces. One of the great lessons from my mom was her giving me savings bonds. She told me that she took deductions from her paycheck to save money, college tuition. She also mentioned she didn't do what others did, which was cash in before maturity. Yes, yes. When my boys were a lot younger, I grabbed them up a few savings bonds as well. I do like that. Before we close out the live, are there any of you that want to share some of that mother wisdom, mothers of Black Hollywood? Yes. Is there anyone? Oh, the actress Jennifer wrote the book. Yeah. Please, when you can, drop that book, because it was really, really good. It had a lot of great chapters about healing like mother wounds, which brings us to what we're going to be talking about over the space of the month of May. I always have a theme. So all month long, we're going to be talking about some aspect of motherhood coupled with mothering. So I want you guys to send over any questions, any comments that you might have. And lastly, I'm going to show over the gift, right? So I'm going to be doing a giveaway. I'm going to check the comments and then I'll go back and comment. So I am going to be giving away this little mother's box once. I'm going to give one on IG, one on Facebook. You would have to comment on the video, share the video, and email me your show notes. Natasha, if you could drop my email address there while I show them what's inside of there. So obviously you're going to get my book. It's called 10 Things Every Woman Should Keep in Her Purse. You're going to receive my signature t-shirt. It says, I get money, you get likes. Little Shawnee shade, just a little Shawnee shade. And then you get my signature diamond pen. It says, money making pen. So I hope that you guys were able to glean a few things. I hope you're able to glean a few. Mother of Black Hollywood. Okay, perfect. Yes, that is the name. That is the name. So the name of the book that I was talking about, where Jennifer is talking about how she healed her relationship with her mom and how that helped her become more creative, more ambitious once she dropped some of that mental weight. It is by Jennifer. It's called Mother of Black Hollywood. It was a great read. Even though it was big, it was quick. Be sure to discuss blended families. Oh, blended families and money. I might have to have you on here, Yolanda. I didn't have that. I didn't have that as a topic. So we might have to talk about that in terms of blending families and money. We might have to get you to talk about that, because that's I don't have, that's not my expertise yet. All right, sis. So until next time, do something that's going to add some value to your purse. If you have any comments that you want to share, if you want to win the Mother's Day love box, make sure that you follow the instructions. And as always,